So, hi everyone, welcome to our webinar for Mental Health Awareness Month this May, Developing Work-Life Balance and Prioritizing Mental Health in Academia. Um, I'd like to welcome our panelists for this webinar. We have a great set of people coming to talk to you. So first of all is Alex Mawson. He's publishing editor in the STM Journals editorial team, managing a range of scientific and medical journals. Alex has a background in content management, magazine publishing, and literary publishing. He holds a Bachelor of Arts in International Studies for the University of Denver, a Master's of Fine Arts from Creative Writing from the University of New Orleans. And our next panelist is Janie Devereaux. She is a senior publishing editor with 15 years of experience in academic publishing across public health and medicine. She works closely with the editors-in-chief and editorial boards to guide journal strategy, optimize performance, and expand global access to high-quality, peer-reviewed research. She is based in Ann Arbor in Michigan, and she's an active member of the Society for Scholarly Publishing and serves on its education committee, helping shape conversations about the future of scholarly publishing. So Michelle is our third panelist. Michelle DeCoe-Hampton, after 2 years as the associate editor of the Journal of American Psychiatric Nurses Association, she has recently assumed the role of editor-in-chief. She is an experienced academic writer with multiple publications in nursing and mental health care and peer-reviewed journals. She has expertise in the development of scientific writing skills for doctoral and master's students in 15 plus years of graduate health professional education at Stanford University, San Jose State University, and Samuel Merritt University, including creating the scientific writing assessment rubric and its guide for faculty use to educate both students and faculty in writing skill acquisition, coaching, and preparation of manuscripts to meet publishing standards. In addition to her role with JAPNA, her research interests include holistic admissions review and expanding access to health professional education for underrepresented students. She also serves as an Associate Dean of Operations and Partnerships at Samuel Merritt University's College of Nursing in Oakland, California. Bettina M. Beach, our fourth panelist, is the Editor-in-Chief of Population Health and Translational Science and Clinical Professor of Clinical Sciences. My apologies. She's the Chief of Population Health and Translational Sciences and the Clinical Professor of Clinical Sciences at the University of Houston, a nationally recognized leader in the population health. Dr. Beach specializes in late-stage translational research with a focus on chronic disease and disparities. Her work integrates precision health strategies to examine the impact of loneliness and social isolation on obesity-induced hypertension, and explores plant-based dietary interventions aimed at reversing cardiovascular disease. She's a fellow of the American Heart Association. Widely regarded as a thought leader in population health strategy, Dr. Beach holds board appointments with the Humana Foundation, the National Board of Health and Wellness Coaches, the Qualtrics Higher Education Advisory Council, Geisinger Medical School, and the Interdisciplinary Association for Population Health Sciences. She was recently named the Editor-in-Chief for Population Health Management, a peer-reviewed journal published by SAGE. A native of Los Angeles, California, Dr. Beach earned degrees from Temple University and the University of Texas Health Science Center School of Public Health, and completed postdoctoral training at MD Anderson Cancer Center, and was 2011 to 2012's fellow in the Hedwig van Ammingen Executive Leadership in Academic Medicine Program for Women. In addition, she completed the American Council on Education Fellows Program and is a recipient of the J. Michael McGuinness Leadership Excellence Award from IAPHS. My name is Georgina. I am the marketing executive on the community engagement team here at SAGE. My primary role is to provide support for authors and reviewers as they move through the publishing process, with particular focus on providing targeted resources to provide support at the appropriate time in the publication process. So, just one final note of our lovely panelists. Before we get started, I just want to highlight the work of a couple of our brilliant panelists today. They are editors of SAGE journals. So Michelle works as the editor-in-chief of the Journal of American Psychiatric Nurses Association, and Bettina works as the editor-in-chief of Population Health Management. If you're interested in exploring the work of these journals, please feel free to use the QR codes to visit the homepage or sign up to peer review for the journals using the QR codes. As we begin our presentations, feel free to enter any questions into the Q&A function throughout the session. We'll try to answer as many as we can at the end of our presentation, and any we don't get to will be sent in a follow-up email. So this is just a look at the typical author journey, moving from early stages of securing funding and conducting research all the way through to peer review. Today, we're going to be talking about the mental health in academia. This is something researchers already feel, but rarely hear about. So publishing systems really affect people, and mental health affects scholarship at every stage. I'm going to hand over to Alex now to start his presentation. Thank you all for joining us.
Regina. So, as Regina mentioned, today's webinar is about recognizing something that many researchers already know intuitively, but don't hear acknowledged often enough. Publishing is not just a technical or administrative process. It's a deeply human one. Mental health affects how research is conceived, written, reviewed, and revised. Stress, uncertainty, and pressure are side effects of academia. They're often built they aren't just side effects of academia. They're often built into its structures. Our goal today is not to lower ambition or expectations, but to explore how researchers can pursue meaningful scholarly work while protecting their well-being. Sustainable research requires sustainable people. Academia often treats research as purely intellectual, but in practice, it is also emotional and psychological. Waiting for decisions, interpreting feedback, navigating rejection, and comparing oneself to peers all place real emotional demands on researchers. Importantly, mental health challenges are experienced across career stages, from graduate students to senior faculty. Stress and self-doubt are not signs that someone doesn't belong in academia. They are common responses to high-stakes, evaluative environments. Naming this openly helps reduce isolation and stigma. Research on burnout in higher education consistently shows that burnout is strongly linked to workload, uncertainty, and institutional pressure, not simply individual coping skills. Emotional exhaustion, reduced motivation, and feelings of inadequacy are widespread in academic settings. This matters because burnout doesn't just affect how people feel. It affects creativity, concentration, and persistence. Framing burnout as a systemic issue helps move the conversation away from individual resilience and toward healthier structures and expectations. Publishing is uniquely stressful because it combines several challenging elements at once: high personal investment, delayed feedback, unclear timelines, and professional evaluation. Even when feedback is constructive and meant to strengthen the work, it can land emotionally, especially when researchers have spent months or years on a project. Different stages of the publication process create different kinds of stress. Before submission, many researchers struggle with perfectionism, revising endlessly, delaying submission, or feeling their work is never good enough. During peer review, long periods of silence can trigger anxiety, rumination, and fear of negative judgment. When revision requests arrive, the cognitive and emotional load can be overwhelming, especially when balancing teaching, service, or caregiving. And rejection, even when expected, can feel deeply personal and destabilizing. These reactions are not a sign of being overly sensitive. They are predictive responses to high stakes evaluation under conditions of uncertainty. Academia does not always teach boundary setting, but it is a critical professional skill. Not all feedback needs to be processed immediately. It's okay and often healthier to give yourself time before responding emotionally or intellectually. Revision timelines are frequently more flexible than researchers assume, and rest meaningfully improves clarity and judgment. Boundaries protect your capacity to do good work. They don't signal a lack of commitment. And with that, I will pass to my colleague, Jamie.
Thanks so much, Alex. So across the scholarly community, there's a growing recognition that mental health is not just an individual concern. It really is shaped by expectations, workflows, and the overall culture. Community-wide conversations about mental health can help reduce the stigma and normalize seeking out help and support. Importantly, there's an increasing acknowledgement that boundaries, flexibility, and realistic timelines support resilience. This shift reflects better understanding that well-being and performance are not opposing forces, but actually work in tandem. So psychological safety, what this means is feeling able to ask questions, express uncertainty, and acknowledge limits without fear of judgment or negative consequences. For researchers, this can apply to labs, departments, collaborations, and interactions throughout the publication process. So when people feel unsafe or constantly evaluated, stress can increase and engagement can drop. And when people feel supported, they're more willing to seek clarification, revise their work thoughtfully, and persist through challenges. Psychological safety is something that researchers deserve across their communities and academia, as well as their interactions with journals. Safer environments produce stronger research. So first, would like to really highlight that feeling stress, anxiety, and self-doubt do not mean that you are failing. They mean that you are human working in a demanding system. Stress in academia is not constant. It can move in waves. Teaching terms, grading periods, grant deadlines, even holidays can all intensify pressure and timelines. So being aware of these cycles allows researchers to plan more strategically, choosing when to submit their work, revise, or even pause when possible. Anticipating peak times of stress is really useful foresight. Planning around emotional bandwidth is a valid research strategy. We encourage you as researchers to plan submissions and revisions with emotional bandwidth in mind when possible. Although scholarship often feels solitary, well-being improves when researchers feel connected. Things like peer support, writing groups, and honest conversations about rejection and revision reduce feelings of shame, isolation. Sharing experiences doesn't mean lowering standards. It means acknowledging that struggle is part of scholarly life. Being a part of a community protects against burnout more effectively than isolation ever could. Academic success is often framed as constant productivity, but long careers require pacing. Productivity is cumulative, not continuous. So periods of rest, reflection, and recalibration are part of sustained contribution to the literature. Protecting mental health allows researchers to remain curious, creative, and engaged over time, which ultimately strengthens their impact. Setting boundaries, seeking support, and prioritizing well-being are not acts of disengagement. They're investments in your scholarship and yourself. Your research benefits when you are healthy, and you deserve conditions that allow you to thrive. To sum up this introductory section, remember you do not have to fix everything at once. Even small changes, one boundary, one peer-to-peer conversation, one pause in the process where it makes sense can meaningfully shift how research feels. So take each step of the process exactly as that, one step at a time. And now I will pass it over to Dr. DeCoe-Hampton.
Thank you. Good morning. So what I'm going to address in my portion of the presentation are 6 strategies to help build that work-life balance with your scholarship. First, I developed these out of advice from mentors and observation of some particularly successful peers. But then I had to refine it based on my own process of trial and error to find what worked best for me, because we all work in our own ways. So I'll review each of these strategies one at a time and give some thought to how they can meet your needs for productivity as well as maintain balance in your life. Next slide. So number one, I would say prioritize your own development. And The best approach can fluctuate depending on where you are in your career right now, but when you're trying to build a program of scholarship, it really helps to maintain consistency in the other areas of your academic life. So your teaching, your service, or committees, if those can stay consistent, then you won't have extra time that's needed for learning new information and skills to be able to teach and contribute to your committees. You also might want to use caution with changing positions and particularly taking on leadership positions too soon. These can be really consuming and can really derail your scholarship trajectory. Um, and while in general, I would say not to allow your work responsibilities to leach into your evening and weekend time, when it comes to scholarship, you might need to work on those in the evening and on the weekends to jumpstart your research and scholarly projects. When you make these sacrifices earlier in your career, it can mean that you have greater opportunities and choice later on. So I would say if you're having trouble with getting started, don't expect to fit that into your 40-hour work week. You've got to work on it outside of that time. But you have to draw a line with the teaching and the service that they don't go into that time. Otherwise, you won't have anything for your scholarship. Also, when it comes time to preparing your dossier for promotion, try to avoid saying that you don't have time for it because that's something that you really have to preserve for yourself. Always ensure that part of your week is for your own personal development. Next slide. So when we're looking at promotion, that requires accomplishments in teaching, scholarship, and service. So if you are planning for the year that's coming up, set your goals annually, and then you'll want to create subtasks for each of those goals. And the way I operationalized working on this for myself was setting a monthly reminder to check in on my progress towards those goals. And when you do that, you have the opportunity to revise the goals if needed. You can revise your plans and how you're achieving them based on your progress. So the way I would do that is when I had my reminder set, I created folders for my teaching, my scholarship, my service domains, as well as an administration folder. And whenever things have happened within a month, I will categorize those into the folder. Now, for me, it was too much to try to organize those up front. So when I had my Friday afternoon checkpoint once a month, I would just take documents, emails from the folder, and I would just save them into those folders. And so then the work of organizing and presenting it in a way that's meaningful is something I reserved for when it was time to prepare my dossier. The benefit to reflecting regularly is you're less likely to forget those things that come up that don't make it onto your CV, your community service, presentations you might have been invited to present, teaching and performance evaluations. Also, the benefit of frequent reflection is that you're more likely to recognize that your accomplishments are meaningful and reassure yourself that you do, in fact, meet the expectations because we can have a self talk that tells us that we haven't done enough. And when you do this regularly, you see that you often have met and exceeded the criteria and are less likely to feel like there's still more to do. Next slide. So part of my to-do list every day is planning for the next day. And I plan for the week overall on Sundays. And I'm always breaking larger tasks into smaller components, planning backwards from goal dates or deadlines. And when you do this consistently, you can have consistent results. And I would say that the key to this is if you've tried to do that and it's not working, you might need to break it down even further. So let's say my plan was to gather studies for a background and I'm stuck, still haven't gotten it done, then what I would do in that case is if I've got 3 2-hour blocks during the week, say Tuesday morning, I'm going to add to my list, identify the search terms, test a few search strategies with the limits, and save the search once I've gotten to a place where it feels relevant. For me, getting to under 200 makes me feel like I've narrowed it enough. Then the second block of time, I'm going to pull up that search return. I'm going to make highlights for the studies that I want to retrieve, not necessarily doing that day, but noting each one that I want to retrieve. Then that third day, I'll retrieve those studies, save them into folders, and then create my reading schedule, knowing that I can realistically read about 3 studies within a 2-hour time block. And then I'll plug those into my calendar. So smaller and smaller steps, doing the work in a way that organizes it and makes it easier to access and retrieve down the line is really helpful. It's kind of like when you clean your house and your mind feels less cluttered too. Organizing those pre-writing steps can declutter and clarify your thinking as well. Next slide. The next strategy is to use your teaching breaks or downtime strategically. So it can often be easy to find a few gaps or breaks in our schedule, but if that time doesn't align with when our cognitive energy is highest and align with the work needed for that task, you might not be successful. So for me, I know that I think best and most clearly between 5 and 10 a.m. And there are some pre-writing tasks that I can do outside of those hours, like the busy work of retrieving and saving papers, transcribing notes from my reading into my literature table. But there are a lot of other tasks that I know I have to do within those hours and without interruption. So those include writing the first draft of a proposal or a manuscript, doing my reading, thoughtful reading at least, proofreading a paper. It might require less time, but when I want to be able to look at the alignment overall and the logic of it, the flow, I do need to do it within those hours. So trying to do so outside of those hours, not only am I less productive, but it's really a misery and it doesn't work. I feel like I'm failing because I'm working against my own natural rhythms. So part of figuring out what works for you is figuring out when you work best and what you can and can't do in various cycles of your cognitive energy. Next slide. So if you are often find yourself feeling overwhelmed, you're in really good company. Personally, I see overwhelmed feelings come in waves throughout every project. And the key to this is expecting it, accepting it, and having a strategy for working through it when it occurs, and it will occur and it will occur again. A few of the most common roadblocks that I've encountered with writers and for myself personally are uncertainty, feeling overwhelmed, and perfectionism. And I have a couple of suggestions whenever those occur. So often people who are uncertain are they feel pressure to write or produce something, but aren't feeling particularly motivated in any area. So I always advise them to read. And once the reading starts and you are a regular consumer and reader of research literature, the ideas flow and they're plentiful. And that naturally leads to the next stage of feeling overwhelmed. When you have so much information, you have to be able to organize it in a way that's meaningful. You might use literature table, outlines. There are many strategies for organizing within the various stages of developing a project. And then the last stage is, even after you've done all that, you might still feel like it's not good enough. And so my suggestions are to refine your work within reason, commit to a certain step-by-step process of editing, getting feedback, doing your proofreading, and then committing to a deadline or a goal date to submit your paper for review. If you've done your due diligence, you've got to just kind of rest with that and let it go. I would encourage you to change your mindset of feeling when those overwhelmed feelings occur to stop feeling like it means I can't or I should stop this and just recognize it as a feeling that's popped up again. It'll pass as all feelings do. Work your strategy to work through it and then keep breaking it down into smaller and smaller components. Next slide. I have typically not had a huge team of colleagues at any particular institution, but I was really fortunate when I worked at San Jose State University to come into contact with a group of colleagues within the CSU system, and we've partnered together on several projects. And the way the work usually begins is someone has an idea or it comes up in one of our meetings, and someone agrees to take the lead, plan the work, and the rest of us contribute in various ways. So it might take time to figure out how to work together, but when you have a group of people, you can do more, you can take on a heavier load, and you're likely to come out with more substance and publications and grants, more studies. So, in addition to just a steady flow of work, planning ahead is good for maintaining healthy relationships. So, when you're starting the process, talk about what sort of research questions you have, who's going to take the lead, what's the order of authorship. And it might seem awkward to do this in the beginning, but it's even worse if you don't plan at the time, and it can lead to hurt feelings and damaged relationships when it is preventable and can lead to a mutually beneficial relationship if you can just set the expectations early on. And so I'll conclude with a quote by Audre Lorde. Next slide. So the quote is, "Caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it's self-preservation, and that's an act of political warfare." We often need to be very intentional in giving ourselves permission to make ourselves a priority. We often default to putting everyone and everything else first, but there are long-term benefits to prioritizing yourself and your development, not just for you, but those you hope to serve, your students, your colleagues, the people you mentor, patients. So take the time, invest in yourself and your scholarly work, and see the benefits. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Good day, everyone. I'm going to talk a bit about the attention economy and how this affects the collapse of our work-life boundaries. So I'm going to start with a little bit of story that I hope you can relate to. So recently I sat down to write a paragraph, just one paragraph for a manuscript revision. Opened my laptop, pulled open the document, and before typing a single word, I thought, let me just check that one email. 40 minutes later, I had answered 6 messages, clicked through 2 links, skimmed a news article, and somehow ended up reading a thread about a conference I'm not even attending. And the paragraph remained blank. I remember thinking, how is it that I'm working all the time, but not actually getting to the work that matters? That moment wasn't about willpower. It was about the attention economy and how it shapes our mental health and our publishing journey. Next slide. And I apologize. You can go to the next slide. We're living in a time where our attention isn't just something we use, it's something that companies try to actually capture. That's the core of the attention economy. Platforms are built to keep you there, to sell the time you spend looking at a screen. Every ping, every alert, every little red badge is designed to grab a slice of your focus because your focus is profitable. Simply put, your distraction is someone else's business model. And this hits scholars particularly hard because deep thinking and writing require long stretches of uninterrupted focus. But the digital world in which we live is engineered to break those stretches apart. And ironically, the very environment we rely on for research is the same environment that constantly pulls our attention away from it. Next slide. So why is it so hard to escape? Even when we know what's happening, we still get caught because the attention economy operates on multiple levels. On the neurologic level, notifications act as microstimuli that prompt tiny releases of dopamine, the neurotransmitter that is associated with anticipation and reward. Over time, our brains learn that checking brings the possibility of something gratifying, an acceptance email from a journal, a citation alert, or a message from a collaborator. So the result is that our brain is trained for fragmentation, constantly scanning for the next hit, of settling into deep, sustained scholarly focus instead of doing them. Socially, academia tends to reward responsiveness, fast replies, constant availability, and online visibility. It reinforces the idea that the most responsive scholars are the most committed. Quick replies signal professionalism, and being reachable at all times signals dedication. But this creates a social environment where delayed responses feel like failure. Being offline feels risky, and visibility becomes a proxy for value. Professionally, as you know, every stage of publishing is digitally mediated: submissions, revisions, reviewer correspondence, promoting your papers. The entire scholarly pipeline now runs through digital platforms, and manuscripts are submitted that way. Revisions arrive via email, reviewer comments appear in dashboards, and promotion and tenure dossiers are uploaded to portals. So that means we're tethered to digital systems at every career stage, and productivity becomes intertwined with platform engagement. Psychologically, it taps into FOMO, fear of missing out, of falling behind, or not being productive enough. Next slide. So the result is this constant fragmentation has real consequences. You heard my colleagues speak about this earlier: chronic stress, cognitive fatigue, a reduced sense of accomplishment, heightened self-criticism, burnout, and imposter syndrome fueled by comparison. Next slide. So let's just take a little journey through the major stages of publishing and look at where distractions and stress show up and what we can do about it. Next slide. So in the idea generation and literature review stage, we have challenges such as information overload, endless searching, a fear of missing something. There is more to read now than any human could ever process. And so we're endlessly searching using digital tools that make us feel like the perfect source is just one click away. And academics tend to be trained to be exhaustive in their searches. So we fear that something is missing, and the internet can make that impossible to be as comprehensive as we would like to be. So here's some deep work strategies that can be used. Bounding your research sessions, even 45 minutes. Work for 45 minutes and then stop. Put fencing around your time, and when the time ends, you're finished. These constraints can help create clarity. Something that I use a lot is a parking lot document. So whenever distracting ideas come about, I just jot them on a piece of paper next to me so that I will come back to it. I don't have fear of forgetting it, but I can let it go and my mind can go back to what I'm doing. Practicing mindful reading is another strategy. Slow down, annotate, summarize, because if you can't explain it in your own words, you haven't actually read it. Next slide. So in drafting the manuscript, we also experience interruptions, and you heard about a little bit of procrastination and perfectionism. One interruption, like the story I started with, can cost up to 10 to 20 minutes of cognitive recovery. Takes a minute to get back to your trend of thought, and that loses time for you. Procrastination, when our tasks feel big, our brains sometimes default to things that are easy, such as email or scrolling, that we call doing research. And perfectionism is very difficult. We turn drafting into dithering, and it keeps us tweaking sentences instead of producing ideas. But some of the most powerful strategies that I've used come from a book called Deep Work by Cal Newport, and you heard a little bit about this earlier. Deep work blocks, 25 minutes, so short, focused bursts of attention. They're unfocused marathons. Rather than 25 minutes can really keep your attention rather than 2 hours, which can be very difficult to have that focused time. For some people, I realize others can work with stretches. But for me, breaking it up into 45-minute segments tends to produce a little bit more than a longer stretch of time. The distraction capture list I talked about, your brain throws out something, write that down, capture it. That way you're not thinking about emailing that person or checking a citation. You can do that later. And then creating environmental cues. such as I wear headphones or I work in a dedicated spot, or using browsers that block signals so that you're not interrupted and your brain knows this is time to work. Next slide. Revising and responding to reviewers. This can be very difficult. We have constant deadlines, constant evaluation, and that can feel very weighty. We can criticize ourselves and become very overwhelmed. So again, some of the strategy you can use is when you read your feedback, read it once, then step away. Don't perseverate over it. Your first reaction is typically emotional, not analytical. So give your nervous system time to settle before you decide what that feedback really means. Chances are, when you go back and look later, you might have misread it. So read it once, put it away, come back to it later. You heard about this in the last presentation. Breaking revisions into micro tasks is also helpful. Turn the revise this manuscript, the R&R, into tiny, concrete actions. One paragraph, one citation, one figure. Small wins tend to build momentum. Also, using self-compassionate scripts really help. A simple phrase like, "This is simply part of the progress process. It's not a reflection of my worth." It can help interrupt that self-critical loop that sometimes happens in our brain. Next slide. Also, we heard a little bit about uncertainty and compulsive inbox checking as well. Waiting for decisions. I've been doing this the last couple of weeks, waiting for grant review, waiting for a manuscript that's taking a little bit too long to review. That uncertainty can create a mental holding pattern in your brain. And so you're checking compulsively your inbox. Every refresh might bring new news, and clicking feels like productivity, even though it's really not. So you can schedule time to check your email. And outside of those windows, it's off limits. And I realize people can't do that every day, but as you're working on a project, set times, maybe 3 times a day to check email. I actually do this on vacation as well, so I keep up with my email. You can also shift to a parallel project, something else to redirect your energy so that you're not just wasting time, something that you can refocus on. And also a grounding technique. Just when the what ifs just spark in your brain, pause, breathe, feel your feet on the floor, and bring your attention back to the present moment. And those little simple strategies really do help. Next slide. Publication and promotion. I'm going to focus on the deep work strategies here. Define your own metrics of success. That can be really helpful rather than comparing to others. What works for you? What are your goals? And focus there. If you're promoting your work through social media, batch or schedule those posts so you're not constantly engaging. And most important is celebrate those milestones intentionally. Make sure that you are celebrating your victories, both small and large. Next slide. So in closing, just a few cross-cutting self-care practices that can help. Digital hygiene, again, turning off non-essential notifications, using focus modes. Sometimes I have to park my Apple Watch because the notifications, I realize I can turn them off, but I get very anxious when I'm constantly getting pinged. So sometimes I just set that watch aside. Taking somatic rests, 60-second breathing exercises, stretching, short walks. These are really important and they can help just reset your mind. Again, boundary setting. Protect time like it's a meeting. Put meetings on your schedule with yourself that have a code that you know what it is. So if someone else is looking, they're not saying, "Oh, you're just writing at that time." That boundary setting is important. And Michelle talked about this community care, writing groups, peer support, shared struggles really help because deep work is a mental health practice. Next slide. So I will end where I started. Remember that blank paragraph that I talked about at the beginning? Well, of course, I eventually wrote it, but not by trying harder. I wrote it by changing the environment around my attention, turning off the notifications, closing those tabs. I don't know if you've ever noticed how many tabs we have open in our computer. And I gave myself permission to focus for just a short window. And in that quiet space, the words finally came. And that's what I hope for you. Not more pressure, but more space. Next slide. And so, in closing, your attention is your most valuable scholarly resource. So, protecting it is an act of self-care. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much to all of our panelists for presenting. Before we get started on the Q&A, I've got a few things just to run through that I'd like to promote on our end. So we have this webinar as part of a series, our How to Do Research and Get Published webinar series, and we've got a few more coming up over the next few months. So we've got our one in June about research that impacts the queer community. We have one in June also about mastering neurology, publications specific to those working in neurology. And on July 1st, we have one about conducting independent research. If any of those sound interesting to you, please find out more and visit our information for pages and sign up to join our webinars. We also have a dedicated space for author support and services at our Sage Information for Authors pages. They have additional webinar resources, answers to common author questions, and it's also about where you can learn more about writing papers and research and interacting with the publishing system. So please feel free to explore those resources on our page. Finally, if you're an author and you want to get updates from us, please feel free to sign up to our author newsletter. These come through once a quarter and they discuss academic publishing resources, and they let you know what webinars are coming up over the next few months. So feel free to sign up using the QR code there. Great. Okay, I think we are going to move on to our Q&A section. So thank you all for listening to our presentation. We'll hand over to the Q&A now. So I'm going to start with one question that has got quite a few upvotes. So I'm going to start with Dinesh's question, which is, what resources, programs or apps do you rely on or use most to frequently organize these goals strategically? Compared to digital, Dinesh says, compared to digital, I find pen and paper approaches to stimulate creativity. So do you have any advice for using different apps or different strategies for organizing your goals? Maybe we could start with Michelle.
Sure. I actually use a combination of both electronic and pen and paper. So to be creative and to often get a first draft or something of an idea, I like to write it out on paper and then I can take it from there digitally. But to manage my broad goals, I will often enter them into my calendar and set alarms for not only the large deadline at the end, but the subcomponent tasks. And that helps me to remember to put it into my weekly schedule.
That sounds like some good advice. Break it into different steps and make sure you get reminders. Do you have any other notes, Dr. Beach?
I do the same. I tend to use pen and paper a little more. I carry it with me everywhere so that I can jot down notes and ideas. And I set my goals by the academic calendar rather than by the annual calendar. So when everyone's doing their January goals, well, that's the middle of the academic year for me. So I set those in November and follow that schedule.
Sounds very sensible. Thank you very much for that advice. I am going to move on to a question we've seen written in a few different ways by Antoinette and also Nadine. I just want to ask if there's any advice you have for negotiating unrealistic expectations or pressure that you're feeling from your institutions that you're invested in. We start with Michelle again.
Well, I probably should start by saying when I graduated with my PhD, I felt the pressure to definitely go to a research intensive institution, but I think I knew myself well enough that I didn't necessarily want that pressure. And sometimes I go back and wonder if that was a great choice or not. But it did make me feel like I could focus more on things that were meaningful to me. And so and not feel that pressure of just having to produce something because it's a publish or perish kind of situation. So those are things that people can think about whether you choose a teaching institution or a research intensive one.
I think it's the opposite. I trained in and have always worked in R1 institutions. And you're right, the pressure is relentless. So what I've done is I have kept mentors throughout my entire career. Even though I'm very senior now, I still have a mentor that I meet with monthly, that still meets with his mentor monthly. It's not something that you come to the end of the road and you don't need mentoring. Also have sponsors, people that connect me with opportunities or look out for opportunities for me. So they're just that connector, different than a mentor. And I think those individuals really make a difference in your life that you can go to and talk about things as you are mentoring others. So yeah, I think that network of mentors and sponsors are critically important.
Getting that kind of community around you to make sure that you're supported throughout your career, I think is some great advice. It takes a village, as they say. So I'm going to go with Yusser's question, which is while acknowledging that stress and overwhelm is a normal feeling, if anything, a sign of growth, that's a great way of looking at it. How do you differentiate between good and bad stress? I'm sure this is also something our publishers could feedback on, since they're also dealing with stress on the day-to-day, I imagine.
Wouldn't mind chiming in if that's okay, Georgina. It's a very interesting question. I think perhaps bodily you might not be able to differentiate because stress activates different, responses to people as humans. So I think that that's important to note, and really just something that Dr. Beach mentioned about time blocking really resonated with me, and something that I'm going to take out of this webinar and go back and do, eliminating distractions, but also, perhaps keeping a list. Something pops into my mind that's not what I'm working on, instead of pivoting what I'm doing to that action, taking it for later and keeping, my focus on this important task that I'm doing at the moment. So little things like that, I think can go a long way as far as dealing with stress and making sure that you're breaking it down into components that you can action individually, instead of just feeling, oh, I'm overwhelmed, good, bad, that's all going to feel in yourself, in your body. So.
Yes, Dr. Beach.
Georgina, I fear that I did not completely answer the last question about unrealistic expectations, and I wanted to circle back to that. Two strategies. When you're early career, that's where that mentor piece comes in. Someone that can help guide you, but also speak up for you in places and spaces where you are not. On the other side, one of the things you can do is ask for what else you would like to remove from my plate for me to take on something else. And you practice that script before you have that conversation. So this sounds like a great opportunity. What would you like me to set aside so that I can allocate time for this? And never, ever, never, ever answer the first time you're asked. Give it, I need 24 hours, 48 hours, so that you can think about it. Even if you're excited about the opportunity, give yourself time. So I apologize. I was not sure I addressed that, and I wanted to do that.
No, thank you. Please, please feel free to be thorough. That was a great bit of advice. Michelle, we were just talking about Dr. Beach was continuing her conversation with the previous question, but also we were talking about the differentiating between good and bad stress and how we can deal with that. Do you have anything to add? If not, we can move straight on.
Good and bad stress. I don't know that I'm able to distinguish it. I think it has to do with how long you allow it to continue without taking the breaks that you need to recover. So that's what I focus on, is just making sure that I have listened to my own body. And when I need a break and a day to do absolutely nothing, then I take that. I do my self-care rituals and then resume the work. And I have a mantra to tell myself it'll all be there tomorrow. It's not going anywhere.
Mantras are very helpful in times of great stress. Thank you for that amazing advice. So, I've got a question from Jocelyn here, um, who asks about advice for dealing with like basically saying no. So, how do you deal with when you've got a lot on, like a lot of work going on in one period, and how do you say no to people to just say like, hey, I've got too much on right now?
I'll jump in first since Michelle's led each of our questions. I think this goes back to the goal setting, making sure that you have your true north from the beginning. That makes saying no a lot easier because you're clear what's on your plate and you're clear what you're trying to accomplish in that academic year or beyond. Again, you can go back to is it a no that you're saying because you're busy? Is it a no because you don't want to do it? There are different ways of handling that. If that's something that you don't want to do, you can provide, especially to your chair or dean, and I'm a former dean, a solution as well. I'm unable to do this now, but X person might be someone, or here are three people that might be outstanding. This is what journals do. If you cannot review now, please give us the name of other people, right? So it's sort of following that same pattern. And no could be no for right now. I'm very interested in this. I can't accommodate this now, but in 3 months, I would be able to do that. So providing a solution with a no often goes well.
That's really great advice.
I can add to that.
Yes,
I
please,
think
please, Dr. Dickey.
this is one of the things that I think varies with the point that you are in your career. And when I was starting out, I didn't necessarily want to say yes to everything, but I didn't feel like I had the option. And down the road, I was actually glad that I said yes. Sometimes I would feel kind of overwhelmed, and sometimes it was more than I could have on my plate. But it paid dividends down the road with being able to choose things, being offered opportunities later. So I would caution against just coming out the gate when you're just starting out and saying no a lot. Shonda Rhimes wrote a book called The Year of Yes, and she talked about how it kind of changed her life in so many ways. So think about using yes strategically.
I like that. So strategies to say no, but also how to strategically say yes. I think that's some great advice, especially across the whole um, sort of academic career. Um, okay, I've got a few questions from different people about how, like, taking work home and working outside of the 9 to 5. So how can you deal with the kind of like working outside of that 9 to 5, time managing that, and protecting your work-life balance? If this is something that's expected of academics to be able to work outside of that time, how do you really sort of safeguard it so that you are finding balance?
I'll jump in. It certainly depends on what you're doing as an academic, right? Just to say that doesn't explain what we're doing. But if you're in research, there really is not a 9 to 5. You just cannot accomplish everything within those hours, specifically with all the meetings. Just go back and look at how many meetings you have in a week. That's part of your work, but your scholarship is not advancing. There's a concept that I use rather than work-life balance is work-life integration. And so it's a book out of the Penn School of Business that talks about how your spheres of personal, community, and work, to have those intersect like a Venn diagram allows you to accomplish more rather than looking at each of them separately. So think about integration as opposed to balance because there's so many reasons why true balance is just really challenging. And I think sometimes we set ourselves up for failures. So part of that is that blocking time, right? How much you're willing to spend, and then setting expectations for yourself, and then managing expectations of others.
I can move, unless anyone has anything else, I can move straight on. Michelle or Dr. Stu?
Yeah,
Andrew?
I was going to add to that because I talked about it a little bit, but
Mm-hmm.
didn't go into much depth. But I do try to keep my teaching and service within the 9 to 5.
Mm-hmm.
And then if I don't have the time that I need to complete my scholarship or my research, then that's what I'm willing to do in my evening and weekend hours because that's really important to me. And that's often when I can get uninterrupted time for the deep work that Bettina talked about.
Yeah, thank you. There are also quite a few questions about how to deal with like unexpected requests, or when things become unexpectedly very busy, or you're in a sort of crowded situation, or your calendar becomes very busy, but in a way that you can't predict. Is there something that allows you to like flow in and out of things, or be more adaptable as you're doing your work?
For me, it's all unexpected. As much as the planning that I can do to control my time, on a daily basis, there's something that comes my way at this point in my career that I do not expect. And so I do allow for that flex time to manage those kinds of expectations or requests that come along. So I think trying to do that as much as you can, but recognize there's several things that are out of your control. And if you understand that that's normative, it may not feel as overwhelming. It's really difficult. Academe, particularly now, we're under a lot of different constraints and a lot more attention than we're used to right now. So there's a lot to manage. But I would say just leave a little bit of wiggle room for those unexpected things, and that way you can at least address them. But it's very hard. This is not a typical 9 to 5 career, no matter if you're in an R1, an R2, R3, if you're teaching, if you're not. I mean, classroom, bless Michelle. I have not taught for years. I'm completely administrative and research, and it's a huge load, an enormous load.
Yeah, and I would add to that. Oh goodness, I lost my train of thought. The question was, oh, about the unexpected things. So I have learned that I can't tolerate an entire day of chaos. So that's why I will use my early morning hours to get a lot done. And then maybe what looks like a shorter day to other people. And then if there's a period of time where I can take in things as they come, and then anything that comes in after that time, I'll deal with in the morning. Just, I have to have some control carved out in my day.
Yeah, so time for structure, time for flexibility, I think is what I'm hearing here. Um, I have a couple of questions here about dealing with like like family expectations. So there's a lovely message from someone, oh, I can't seem to find now, who was talking about having to move away from his family in order to go work in an institution that is in a different country, or maybe in a different state it might be for you. Have you ever felt like you had to deal with sort of like a give and take between when you'd like to be able to be there for your family or having to move away? And how have you dealt with that in the past?
Well, I haven't had to move, but I did when I went through a divorce. My daughter was quite young. She had a really difficult time with me, even just going away for a few days for a conference. So at that point, I decided I was going to limit my conferences to two a year, and at least, and space them out. And so we would have less time that we were dealing with the fallout of that. So it meant that I could still keep doing what I felt was important, just not to an extent that it was taking even more of a toll on my family.
Yeah, and
And
being able to find a
oh,
balance. Oh, sorry.
no, go ahead.
I was just gonna sort of recap that it's, good to try and find a balance of what your family can take, and how you can balance that out with what you need for your career. Dr. Beach?
I think sometimes in providing answers, it sounds like we have it all together. And I'll say I certainly don't. It's a struggle. I tried to, my daughter is now finished school. I'm an empty nester, but I've always been two career couple. So that's really difficult. Not lived around family for very long, so needed to manage that. And I would take work with me all the time. So I didn't miss anything that my daughter was doing. And I prided myself like, well, I'm here. I'm there, but I had work. And years later, she told me, yeah, but you weren't present. You were focused on something else. And I realized I missed the mark there. So again, it's difficult. I always tell early career faculty, think about how you want your life to be, and then set up your career around it. And I think Michelle talked about that. This is how I want my life. This is who I am. And then select positions that align with that. Don't walk into a situation and then think you can adjust, because the institution is more inflexible. So I thought I was doing the right thing, and it turned out that I didn't.
I think that's a really poignant and lovely note for us to end on. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, panelists, for all your lovely advice. Thank you to all the participants who've come to watch our presentation and to participate in our Q&A. Thank you all for your lovely questions. If there's anything we haven't got to, we'll try and get to them in our follow-up email, so keep an eye out for that. So that's it from us at Sage and Dr. Beach and Dr. Duku Hampton. Thank you very much, and we'll hope to see you at another webinar soon.